Good evening, everyone. I'm going to open our meeting tonight here at Tolliver, and we thank Tolliver and folks here for hosting us. We start at 6, and off we go. So, item number 2, we need to have approval of the meeting agenda as submitted.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, let's go to item number 3, which is work session focus. Today is our state assessment results. And Mrs. Satterley is going to talk to us about that. We do have that on e-meeting for everybody to follow.
It is a hefty document. I think it's 36 pages front and back. It's this one.
So you only get to cover 3.
Only get to cover 3 pages? Oh, gosh.
This is the first one.
I'm just gonna, if it's okay with you all, I'm just going to talk through it, and please stop me, I'll stop at the end of each assessment and ask if you have questions, but if there's a question that you're thinking of right then, please don't hesitate to stop me, because y'all know once I get going. So on the first page, you'll see that I listed all the assessments that we administered that are in this packet and the data that was utilized. Brigance is our K-screen, our kindergarten screener that we screen all of our kindergarten students with. The Kentucky Summative Assessment, we're calling it that now. It is the new name from Kentucky. It is no longer K-Prep. We administer that grades 3 through 8, 10, and 11. Grades 3 through 8 and 10 all take reading and math. 4th, 7th, and 11th take science. 5th, 8th, and 11th take writing. The 11th grade ACT, and we use the ACT school profile report for that. And there's some data in here for our career and technical education and the students that are in career pathways, whether they are here in Danville, at Lincoln County. We have kids that go to Garrett County, and I'm not sure if we have any this year that are at KSD, but we have in the past.
So we get those results.
Yes.
They
They are ours. Yes.
they're part of our accountability.
Yes, yes. And graduation rate, and it's a 4- and 5-year combined rate. So the first section is Brigance, and again, that's our kindergarten screener. So you can see there is trend data there from, well, first you see administration date. So you can see that over the past 4 years, we have given Brigance prior to or at the very beginning of the school year. We have up to 15 days prior to the start of school and 30 instructional days after the start of school to give it. And currently we do not give the first grade Brigance at the end of kindergarten to have a growth factor. But it's definitely something we can look into and probably should. And then below there you see the trend data, so you can see the enrollment, the number that were tested out of that enrollment. We typically are at about a 99% participation rate. And you can see our percentage of students who were ready in 18-19 was 33.1%. In 19-20, 41.4, and in 20-21, 25.4. And currently, we have a raw number of about 70-30, 30% being ready for this school year. So it didn't move a whole lot this school year. Do you have any questions about that?
Is there a cost on the Brigance if we do it at the end of the year?
Yes.
There is. Is it minimal, nominal, or how much?
Yeah, it's not very expensive.
It'd be good to see that growth. I was just going to mention as well, Ms. Satterley, that a lot of people may worry about the 33, 41, 25%, and that's when our students show up. That's when they show up. That's what we have to work with when they show up. Some people will play, some of the districts will play a game with that and really push that test back to the end of the 30 instructional days and then advertise, hey, we've got 75% kindergarten ready, whenever they perhaps may have, there's a lot of things that can happen in the first 30 days that might make them look a lot more kindergarten ready. So we take them when we get them, and I like the thought of testing at the end of the year to see what the measurement, what we've done. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. We also have some local centers that are using the early Brigance in their daycare centers. And we could get those numbers as well if we wanted them, because a lot of our students come from those centers. Any more questions on Brigance? On the next page, the first box you see is ACT trend data. So you can see over the last 4 school years, this past year is the first year over the last 4 years that we have been above the state averaging on the composite score for ACT. We're not quite where we wanted to be with the strategic plan, but we've had a couple of years where, and we tested, this was the 11th grade one, and we tested 100 students on this one out of 120-ish. 118. So 100 out of 118, and it was strictly could get them to come, because a lot of our high school students were virtual students all year last year. We couldn't make them come, but we had to make our best effort to get them there. So we had 100 out of 118. Thanks. Any questions on that? The next one goes with ACT a little bit. It's college and career readiness trend data. So this is any student who has met college benchmarks on ACT, has passed end of course, end of program exams for a CTE pathway, industry certifications and CTE pathways. We also utilize the Coyote, which is another way to meet the math and reading benchmark if they don't get it on ACT. We currently at Danville High School, I hope I don't forget one, we have a few pathways. We have business and marketing. We have a few students in a teaching and learning pathway. We have engineering, aerospace engineering, cinematography and video production, computer science, and we have the allied health science pathway. But we also have students who go to Gary County or Lincoln County and do carpentry or welding, or we have some students that still go to Lincoln County for the health science pathway because it's in such high demand that we fill our seats here. And we also sometimes fill our seats there because we have so many students who want that pathway. So you can see this is a combined academic and career ready percentage. It's not one versus the other. And some have both. Ms. Kuykendall just pointed out some students are both college and career ready. Any questions? Graduation rate. There's a 4-year trend there. You see we were above the state average in 17-18 and 18-19, and then we've dropped a little bit below state average in 19-20 and 20-21. So this past year we graduated on time, 91.1%, 4 and 5 year rate combined.
So explain that, 4 and 5 year.
So help me out here, Donda. The first year, so everybody's in a cohort year, and they are expected to graduate in 4 years, regardless of if we retain them because of credits. We get that question a lot, why we don't retain in high school as much, because they're still expected to graduate in that 4 years. If they do not graduate, if they're a freshman 4 times, and they don't graduate that 4th year, they're counted as a dropout. And then that 5th year, we add them in again with the next class if they don't graduate that 4th year, and they either count for us or against us the second time. Does that make sense?
It does. So wasn't there something about if they got a GED within so long that that doesn't
That
matter?
doesn't affect us anymore.
Okay.
It may have been something at one time, but
Yeah.
were you gonna say something?
No, that's
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
And this may not, no, it's a 4 and 5 year rate, so it does count students who, so if I didn't graduate in my 4 years, I count against us for that 4 year, but then if I graduate in that 5th year, I can, so it kind of cancels each other out, if that makes sense. But if we roll over a student to a 5th year senior and doesn't graduate the second time, it counts twice against us, if that makes sense. Any questions on that? All right. The next section is really hefty. It is the Kentucky Summative Assessment, formerly known as KPREP. So the next page you see is elementary only. So you see these are consolidated student group numbers. So any student who falls in one of those subgroups of a demographic. So you see how many students in the first half of the chart, the top half, in those areas that scored below proficiency in reading and math. And then the bottom half is students in those subgroups that scored above proficiency. So you can see that in the elementary level, which I say elementary, even though we only test 3 through 5, because we're one feeder system whatever scores Tolliver gets, Hogsett gets also, because they are the feeder school to Tolliver. So if we were in a year where we were doing the star rating system, if Tolliver was a 5-star school, Hogsett would automatically be a 5-star school, because they're the feeder school. But you see, I won't read all these numbers to you, but you see like total number of students with an IEP scoring below proficiency in reading was 61 in elementary, and total number down at the bottom scoring above proficiency was 7. And so you can see the discrepancies in those numbers. And we've assessed a total of 200 students in grade 3 through 5 in the consolidated student group. So that's students with an IEP, African American, 2 or more races, English learners, American Indian, Hispanic. And some of those may count, they may be doubly qualified. So you might have some English learners that are also special education students. And vice versa, any of them can cross over. And then at the bottom, you see free and reduced lunch. I separated that out. I had it up in there, but I wish you could have seen Donda and I trying to add these numbers. Why do we have 210 free and reduced lunch kids not scoring proficiency, but we only had 160 total? And I was like, oh yeah, free and reduced lunch is not technically part of the consolidated student group anymore, but because it's such a big population for our district, we still want to report it and focus on it. So I pulled it out so that it's by itself, because when you see that total number of consolidated student group students, that is just those listed above. Free and reduced lunch is separate down at the bottom. And you can see that our total at elementary, 208 in the free and reduced lunch, economically disadvantaged, scored below proficiency in reading and 60 above proficiency. And it's pretty much the same in math, 203 and 65. Any questions on that one? The next chart, this chart, divides out the performance levels across those subgroups. So I do want to point out that I added in participation rate because we had talked about that in our agenda meeting. We had a 99.2% participation rate at the elementary level, so they really got those kids in here. 392 out of 395 tested. The state average participation rate in elementary was 89.2. So we did quite a bit better than the state average on getting our kids in here to test. You can see the first row where you see all students, you see across there, those are highlighted red. The red highlight indicates that we were below state average in those areas. So we had more novice than the state average, more apprentice than the state average, less proficient, and less distinguished. And you can see how those divide out there. You see the percentages, like the novice of all students was 37.2 in reading, and that equated to 146 students. You can see that down through those subgroups as well. And at the bottom, Donda put the state average down there as well, so you can see how we compare to the state average percentage of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished. No, y'all don't want me to read every single line to you. Questions, thoughts, Dr. Thomas?
I think you've got it there.
Okay.
Appreciate the state averages at the bottom.
Yes.
We see that, in the novice, our African American students are leading the way in novice. And with that information, is there a plan or a process in the works, just, to see what we can do to bridge that gap?
So currently, our instructional leadership team, which is principals and instructional coaches, are working on, when all the principals viewed this data for the first time when it was still embargoed, the overarching comment was, we really need to address our Tier 1 instruction. And not just for subgroups, but for all students, obviously. So we have already identified in the areas of the culture guide that I presented to you all a few weeks ago, our curriculum instruction and assessment, and we have addressed several problems of practice that we want to prioritize and execute on. So our next step tomorrow, actually, when we meet, is to prioritize those problems of practice and start really digging into those And there has been a lot of talk about making sure that our teachers are culturally aware and moving forward with those types of things. But we're also getting ready to participate in some really heavy teacher clarity training around getting our teachers more clarity around their standards and making sure their standards are really aligned to what they say they're teaching, and their assessments and their assignments and their learning targets, and making sure students are aware of what the success criteria is and how they can get to the success criteria, because it's a high percentage, Mr. Stanfield. It really
Yeah,
is.
I mean,
And
it's-
it's the same with,
it's pretty-
I mean, the students with
It's pretty
IEPs
alarming. I mean,
and our English learners as well.
Well, and I appreciate that, and you said talk about like what we can scratch to talk about and get about the work of that.
Right.
And I like the part that you said, because I'm a strong believer that advocacy is a big part of that, and if we can continue to teach our kids, especially our young African-American male students, especially how to become advocates of themselves in their educational process, that's growth for them, and once they can do that, then they start to believe in themselves, and they want to be a part of the educational process. And so I appreciate that component of it that you said, that teaching them that component is going to be just as much. And if indeed, if we could also, and I know we do, but I want to say it, it is a critical component as well to make sure when we're working with those teachers, guys, especially when dealing with African-American young men, I mean, relationships. We say it all the time, but let me tell you, it is a fact that if you can build relationships with them, if we can teach our teachers how to build sustainable relationships, those relationships that let them know that they care, because you can't teach them until they know they want to feel that respect, and when you can put that relationship with teaching them how to self-advocate, I think we win, and we will definitely watch that number decrease, and I think we'll reap the benefit from that. So
I would agree. And one of the big things that has come out in our conversations about problems of practice in Tier 1 is the circle of concern versus the circle of control. We can control what goes on in the classroom and what we teach our students, and making sure we're not minimizing the expectation because of someone's situation.
Absolutely.
Because that's not helping.
That's not helping at all, right? Continue to hold them accountable and keep the bar high and just figure out how to get them there.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, what's interesting to me is our students with IEPs, we have 10.3, is that percent?
Yes, proficient and
Proficient
distinguished.
and distinguished. That's pretty awesome. And I'd be interested to see, I know this is for elementary, I'll be interested to see what that looks like as they get into the higher grades. Because I've looked at some of the AP data, and there are 0 students with IEPs that are taking and passing AP exams.
I was looking to see if Ms. Kelly was back there. Because that's,
Right.
I think that might have been one she was a little discouraged over.
Yeah.
But Tolliver definitely, and Hogsett have made some pretty big moves in special ed and co-teach classrooms and making sure those students have the support they need.
So can I get an opinion on, we have our teachers and all of us culturally aware of the challenges. I mean, we have also a large number of Hispanics that need as much attention. And so is there a challenge to do both? Because you're looking at two different cultures.
Oh, I think there's a challenge to do every single group listed here. I think African American was just the one Mr. Stanfield pointed out.
Just because it was the highest.
Yes,
Well,
and
right.
through our work with Dr. Cleveland, he has challenged us to remember that equity isn't just about ethnicity.
That's correct.
It's about all of these. So I think when we point out African American, I think we're saying we need to do something for all of these groups.
Well, because when you put those things in place, everybody grows.
Yes.
So, you can target that group, but you don't just pull them out, but you push it in. And so when you push in, everybody learns it, and so it makes all of those categories, move.
And we have done a lot of work over the last 2 years on shoring up some of our English language learner procedures and protocols and structures. And
Just within the last 6 months.
just within the last 6 months to 1 year, just the things we've changed and put in place, certain programs for those students that are continuous and evidence-based and research-based, instead of just, we'll teach this today, or,
And hopefully we're gonna see some growth. I think, to my knowledge, I might be wrong. We've tried to give every school what they've asked for. And so hopefully, we're gonna, I know this is this, but we're gonna see some growth in all of that, in the near future. So I think we're ahead of the game, and I'm looking for a big win.
and we're also heavier in English language teachers than we've been in several years, too. We usually have had 1.5, and currently we have 2 that are servicing all 4 schools. On the next few pages, you see these bar graphs. These are all elementary bar graphs, and they just take those subgroups and give you 3 years of trend data. And the red is novice, and the blue is proficient and distinguished combined. I don't know if you wanted to ask any questions about those, or if you wanted me to go over those. I think they're pretty
They are.
Dr. Thomas and I really like the trend data. And some of it, I'll point out, like, obviously we've had 2 years of COVID, but if you look at the English learners at Tolliver, these 2 years were pre-COVID, and you see that that's not changed much. So there are some areas where we have things to do outside of recovering from COVID, because the data has stayed the same even across those years before COVID hit. So you'll notice some pretty big.
And the flip side of that, in spite of COVID, those numbers didn't dip, where in other areas they did die.
Right.
So where if we had everyone around in close quarters, we might have seen an uptick. So it's a little deceptive. And I also want to say, just for a quick second, there's a number of items that our academic chief officer have put into place within the last 3 years, specifically directed at instruction and all of the things that we're talking about. And we started those, and then COVID hit. So it's like we have all these things ready to go, and it was hard to implement without students, and so I feel like there was a good head start, a drop off, and so if we can continue those and just not get frustrated with the lack of, I think continuing with actual students in the body, in the building, we'll be able to see an increase.
And the culture guide, for example, has been in draft for, it's been in talks for 3 years, but we haven't had kids in the building. And now, I feel like, I don't want to speak for the team, but I feel like we've had some really productive conversations this year, and we're starting to move in the right direction, identifying those problems of practice and putting strategies and goals to those problems of practice. So,
We'll continuing to work with Dr. Cleveland, is that right?
yes.
You continuing that work with them?
Yes. Next, you have the same thing, but for math. So you can see that bright spots here in math, the blue in all students is a positive correlation to the state average, and the yellow is within 0.2 of a point to the state average, or it might be right on. This one is right on the state average. So you can see that in math there are some positives right there to look at, but I think Ms. Kelly would agree with me on this. They chose a math program a few years ago, and they have done a lot of work on making sure that math program is aligned to what they want to be doing in the classroom. And if a piece of that program is not congruent to the standard, then they replace it with something else. They're not just attached to that program and only that program. Would you agree?
Correct.
Thank you. And so one of the things we're really working on is making sure things are congruent and not just correlated. We've been working a little bit with CKEC on this too, and somebody asked me the other day, well, explain that to me, congruent versus correlated. Well, I can explain the process of photosynthesis by just labeling it labeling pictures, that's not explaining it. That's correlated to the standard about, that says I can explain the steps of photosynthesis, but it's not explaining it. So we're really taking a step back and looking at our assignments and making sure, are they just correlated, or are they congruent to the verbiage in the standard language, making sure the students are hearing the standard language. I was observing a second grade special ed teacher today, and the standard language was flying out of her mouth, and she was in a 6-student small group of special education students with IEPs, and they knew exactly what, they were picking up what she was putting down, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So, any questions on the math? And there are those trend data charts also with those. Dr. Thomas, you jump in anytime you want to.
You're fine. You're great, really.
Can I ask a quick question? Ms. Kelly? Are there equivalent programs that would kind of align vertically in the same way that it seems like the math programs have done? Are there comparative programs for language?
So, right before COVID hit, we were piloting something of, I believe what you're speaking of, trying to find something that would work for us in reading as well. Cogsett was doing it. We saw some good results coming out of those classrooms. And so, yes, I believe we did, but as soon as we got started, it was kind of like we pressed pause for a while, but definitely have hit that full throttle this year. And I'm hoping that, just like because we've seen consistency with our math program, and we've got some gains, we were above the state average in several of our math areas, you know, with some of those practices, with having our kids back in the building 5 days a week, and really, because of that grant, we added additional time in reading and in math, and so definitely also doing some things with giving kids time on their instructional level. So for 30 minutes a day, everybody's going to go to a group. If you're below grade level, you're going to work on your instructional level. Not at a frustration level where that might be where the grade content is for you. And if you're above grade level, you're going to go to a group with other people who are performing in that same RIT band as you are. So we are trying to attack that, and the thought is to, yes, now that we know we've got something that's working for us, we hope to see the same kinds of results from that reading program. There is the same kind of congruency to the standards focused on in reading as well.
So we're in a place where currently our K-5 classrooms are doing the same math program and the same reading and writing. One thing I personally love about EL education is the writing component. There's a lot bigger writing piece of this than we've seen before. Okay, moving on to science. Remember, science in elementary school is 4th grade only. So we had a 100% participation rate. We were able to get in all 146 of our students to take the science test, and the state average was 89.2%. You do see some blue. We had less novice than the state, but you see we were below state average in other areas. But if you look at the state average at the bottom, the science test is a very different test. It has different types of items. It has those 3 course tasks. It's not structured the same, and we're still working on teaching our kids how to navigate that. And you'll see more data suppressed here probably. Like you see all of the females are suppressed. That's probably because they all scored within the same range, so you would have been able to tell which females scored. They suppress data when you're going to be able to tell if one kid, you know. And then you have the trend charts on the back for those as well. You can see one thing, you can see that our novice percentage has dropped quite a bit in science for our African American students. That's just something to point out. But you're talking about a very small number of students out of 146 as well too. Any questions on that? Okay, the next one is writing, and that's 5th grade students only, 98.4% participation rate. State average was 88%. So overall in elementary, we did a really good job of getting those kids in here to test if they weren't here. Because we had very few, but we did still have some virtual students, some full-time virtual students last year. And you see that, we see some red at the top, but we do have one area of blue. And then you have those trend charts there as well. In writing, you see for the African American on the trend data, you see that proficient and distinguished was below novice those last 2 years we assessed, but last year it was above. And then with our Hispanic students, you see that's another one of those areas where, yes, COVID, but no COVID at the same time. You see the same kind of flip for 2 or more races, where in 18-19 they were scoring proficient and distinguished was below novice, but last year it was above. And then you have economically disadvantaged, which stayed about the same over the last 3 assessments of proficient and distinguished, and then students with IEPs. Anyone have any questions? I'm gonna move on to middle school. Okay. You have the same chart for middle school for the subgroups that you had for elementary. All 3 levels are gonna look very similar. So we might be able to move through the other 2 a little faster than we did elementary. The participation rate, they were pretty close to the state average too, actually above the state average, but 97.1% participation rate in reading. And they had quite a few more virtual students than elementary did, so I would assume my building assessment coordinator over there, if I know her very well, she was probably making phone calls saying you have to bring your kid in to test. You see that we were red across the board for all students in reading, so we were below the state average. You see some of the same, like you see the same trend there, Mr. Stanfield, since you brought up African American, you see the same trend there with special ed. It's a high novice percentage. And then you have those trend charts as well. If you want to look through those and have any questions. Some of those flipped. And if you look at students with IEPs, it stayed the proficient distinguished percentage over the last 3 years stayed pretty close to, went down a little bit. And that's reading, so that's all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students that took that assessment.
I will point out that it does look like that 2021, the COVID year, really, because we were on great trend data heading into that one, so hopefully that's the dip. We'll be back on the target. But the trend data was pretty strong prior to this past year.
And we didn't assess it all in 1920, so that 18-19 years
It was the last of
it was the last
yeah.
assessment. And then the next is math, and we had the same participation rate there, still well above the state average. Had less apprentice than the state average, so the state average was 41.5%, we were 39.5%. And then you have those trend charts as well. And it looks like the same as Dr. Thomas said with the reading. We were seeing pretty good trend data as far as less novice than proficient and distinguished.
I do think it's worth noting the turnout for our testing being so close to 100%, because obviously if the state average, if we're below the state average and we brought everyone in, perhaps, I'm not suggesting this, but certain students may be more motivated to come in and do the state testing, and those are typically speaking, and very generally speaking, your higher achieving students. And we brought all of our students in.
Any questions about math? I will say on reading and math, one of the changes at BATE this year on the master schedule is that all students are receiving 90 minutes of both this year. So but all students are receiving a double block of reading and writing and a double block of math. And at our elementary schools, they added time to the reading and math blocks as well. 30 minutes, you add 30 minutes to the reading and math block as well. That was one of the things we did to try to address the learning loss.
distinguished. You know, the higher end, really pulling our students in the higher end, whenever you look at African American, Hispanic, two or more races, economically disadvantaged, and students with IEP, you're talking about a combined total of 3 students, if I did my math correctly there. So to be able to pull to that highest, there has to be something there as well, some mechanism as we're progressing to pull, to continue to push and have students land in that area because they have the ability to land there.
Next is science. Science is 7th grade only. Same participation rate, well above the state average. And you see there's some red and some blue. So the blue column at the very far right is proficient, distinguished combined. And you see we were below the state average in proficient. We had less students scoring proficient, but we had more students scoring distinguished. And we had a positive correlation in apprentice as well. So our percentage of apprentice is 41.4 in the states with 44.7. So we're doing better there too, because we want to be less in apprentice and novice again and more in proficient distinguished.
Not just a certain population carried us, basically, in the distinguished.
By total students, understand we have 5 total students. That's correct.
But you see that correlation to the state average too, that it, and then those trend charts are there as well. And sometimes you'll see, like on the second one, on the Hispanic one, this data was suppressed for the school year. So if it's not there, it was suppressed for some reason,
I was going to ask that.
one reason or another. And then if you're looking through the trend charts, you see the students with IEPs. For 3 years, we've had 0 students with IEPs score proficient or distinguished. And then writing is next, and it's 8th grade only. It had a high percentage of participation too. Have some red across all students, but there were some gains across the subgroups here. The previous year, not the previous year. You see 2 or more races. If you look at the trend data, in 17, 18, you had 16.7% scoring proficient distinguished, and you had 60% score proficient distinguished last year. Economically disadvantaged, seeing the trend data. I don't know how I've lost it.
I don't see that one, but there's still 26 students, which is fairly high.
Yeah, there's still, it's a 35.1% for proficient distinguished, so it's higher than our novice percentage. So we're moving students there. There are, even though the top boxes might be red, there are some things down below to be proud of. We ready to move on to high school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, high school had a much lower participation rate because we were about 50% virtual, 50% in person last year. But if you look, we were very close to the state participation rate as well. So for reading, which is 10th grade students, we had a 73% participation rate, but the state average was 76.6. So it was a common trend across the state that I think schools had trouble getting their kids into tests. So 92 out of 126 students in the 10th grade came in to take the reading assessment. And you see we have some red, we have we're blue and distinguished, so we were above the state average. But primarily, like Mr. Sanfield said, primarily carried by one population. And then there are trend charts there as well. And here you see a lot of, like in African American and Hispanic reading, you see similar pre-COVID, post-COVID proficient distinguished numbers. And then you see 2 or more races in reading, we had same across the board, novice, the same percentage in 18-19 and the same percentage in 2021. So we just pushed them to the middle.
Right, I was just looking at
Yeah.
it. That was,
Any questions on that? And then you look students with IEPs and reading the past 2 assessments,
Again.
we've had 0% proficient distinguished. And special education is the population that we are targeting for ATSI, our high school. If you'll remember, 17-18, they got that federal classification of additional targeted support and improvement. So we get some assistance from the state here and there, not as much as we would get if our school was CSI. But just for instance, tomorrow and Wednesday, actually it started at 2 o'clock today, 4 education recovery leaders from KDE came in today, and they'll be with us the next 2 days during their monitoring visit at Dingell High School, just to look at the processes and procedures and protocols and structures that we have in place. They interview students, teachers, parents. I think Dr. Thomas has an interview tomorrow. I know they met with Mr. Lumen this afternoon. He had to do a presentation for them this afternoon. They do walkthrough observations, and then we get a really good feedback report of where, hopefully, to take some actionable steps to improve. We also have a really good relationship with the Office of Continuous Improvement at KDE. Those coaches come in and help our principals write phase 2 and phase 3 of their CSIPs, and they will be with us Thursday and Friday at Dingell High School doing some learning intention and success criteria training for all the teachers. So, putting some really good things in place. Math is next. You see some blue. You see 3 blue. We are below the state average in apprentice, which is good. We are above in proficient, and we are above in proficient and distinguished combined. But Mr. Stanfield pointed out a common trend. And then that trend data is there as well. And a lot of it stayed kind of in the same area. A positive students with IEP, 17, 18, 18, 19, we had 0% scoring proficient distinguished, and last year we had 20%. So we improved across that area. Science was taken by 11th grade only. You see we're blue in one area, distinguished, and it was carried by, you see a lot of, it was carried by one student population, but you see a lot of suppressed data here too, because we had such a low participation rate, 50.4%. So of the students who participated, our numbers may have been below 10, because you have to have an count of 10 for the population to even be reported. And then if you had 11 and all 11 scored novice, they're not going to report that either, because we would be able to tell who scored novice, and vice versa for distinguished. And then you have that trend data there as well. And the last one for Dingell High School is writing. We have 44.6% participation rate. We apparently had a much harder time getting our juniors to come into tests than we did our sophomores. Lots of things could play into that. We were below the state average across the board in writing, and a lot of data is suppressed there as well. So we don't really even have much trend data there either, across the subgroups. We only have 2 subgroups. I'm gonna keep going until somebody stops me. The next one, you see converting percentages into numbers. This is our total district population. So you can see in reading, we assessed 854 students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10. And there you can see the total percentage of novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, and how many students that equates to. These next 2 pages were probably, to me, 2 of the most important pages. These are questions that each principal has to answer when they are drafting their needs assessment for their CDIP, but we also have to answer them for the CDIP. And these are very common questions in our district. This is something we answer a lot when we have teachers bring their assessment data to their POC meetings. What does the data tell us? What does it not tell us? What can we celebrate? Where are the concerns? And what are we going to do next? 5 questions. I'm going to skip the what does the data tell us just because I think you can read that yourself, but what does the data not tell us? We don't know how many students out of this were virtual. We did not delve into that yet. I think it would be a really good thing to look at to see how many of these students were virtual and how many of these students actually came back in person. I think, Robert, you may have actually requested that, or one of your coaches did. Is there a score discrepancy between those students? What their well-being is like outside of school? The data doesn't tell us those types of things. The data doesn't tell us teacher effectiveness is having a part on the achievement. It doesn't tell us who the kid had, which students require mental health services, VR, school wellness counselors. Those things are not included. Homelessness is not included. All of those things in that circle of concern are not included. Street data, that's what I call it. There's a book out right now about analyzing that data and what effect it has on student achievement. There are some strengths as we move forward. We finally are in a place where we can start the implementation of our culture guide for continuous improvement now that we're back in person. You all saw that, so you know what that is. We are using Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry playbooks to make our next steps for district-wide professional learning. Clarity for Learning, the Teacher Clarity Playbook, and the Success Criteria Playbook. Those are all around the research of John Hattie and his effect sizes on good instruction. If you want more information on that, I'm glad to send it to you. And one of the reasons the top effect size of Hattie is collective teacher efficacy. So if we can get all of our teachers doing these things, I think Ms. Pusateri said it in the meeting about the culture guide, if we can all do these things, we will be in a good place. So that's our goal. Consistency building in leadership, interim superintendent. Oh, wait, I've moved on. Sorry. We're glad to have Dr. Thomas. I put that in there. And he supports best practice in instruction. Super complimentary of the work that's going on right now and the work that we hope to accomplish. So that's nice. We are addressing problems of practice in Tier 1 instruction and establishing causes of those, goals and strategies to address those. We have the KDP Assistance for high school due to our federal classification. And I put on here the report card rubrics at Hogsett Primary have been something that Ms. Farmer is very proud of. Just making sure we're not just slapping a number on a report card because that's where we think they are at 4, 3, 2, or 1. They've done a lot of work at Hogsett, really making those standards based and making sure if we give them a 4 on the first quarter on letter sounds, we know how many letter sounds they know when they have to meet this mark before they can get that, instead of just giving them a grade. Concern, we're below state average in several performance levels, you saw that, across multiple content areas and grade spans. Certain subgroups are performing well below our white students and those of higher socioeconomic statuses. Our kindergarten readiness rate for 2021, and our number, this is on here, but it wasn't included in this because this was an academic data review. Our number of out-of-school suspensions, we had to do some non-academic data review for the CSIP and the CDIP as well. Obviously, our out-of-school suspensions last year was a really low number because we weren't in school, but prior to that. And then Mr. Stanfield knows through our work with the Equity Council that those numbers go down into the subgroups as well, where we're suspending less white kids. Next steps, we are continuing to implement our culture guide, focusing on teacher clarity and success criteria, and one thing we will begin focusing a little more on in the spring is more vertical planning, especially in those transition grades between our 4 schools, so 1st to 2nd, 5th to 6th, and 8th to 9, and moving towards standards-based grading in more areas. Oh, the non-academic data is on the back. I was wrong. So you see those trends in out-of-school suspensions, in-school suspensions, behavior referrals, and expulsions. And then cultural trends, this box was part of the CSIP and the CDIP, and we were supposed to analyze the data in that chart and anything that is impacting our district as a whole outside of academic. So the main hurdle we face culturally right now is turnover in building and district level leadership. Pinpointed Danville High School, but we also have a vacancy at the middle school right now in building level leadership. So that's a problem we've had. We've had 3 superintendents in the last 12 years, and currently under the leadership of an interim superintendent, and look to have a new superintendent at some point in the spring of 2022. We've also turned over a district finance officer and will turn over a director of special education in January. We also recently, obviously, sworn in 2 new board members, so we've had some turnover on the board as well. So you can see that we have some consistency building to do, district-wide, academically, non-academically, leadership. We just have some consistency building to do.
Thank you, Ms. Satterman. Really a wonderful, strong report. And I say to the board that, you know, you saw some red lines in there, but I haven't seen anyone shy away from our data, nor have I seen anyone really throw the excuse out there for the COVID year. This data is what it is. That's the reason I think trend data is so important for us. And so if we see that we're trending down in a certain area, it just takes a little turn, and then you're trending up, and things become very positive. It starts rolling on that. That's the reason I think the data in general is so important to us to look at, but then also put those plans in place, as you very well heard her say, especially with the Tier 1 stuff that we're doing, and then the common language amongst all of our district leadership, our principal leadership, and then I hear it in the schools as well.
Well, and I just want to comment too, as a board member, this is important information for us. I mean, I think sometimes we get looked at as all we're going to do is complain about where things are. And of course we try not to, because there is a real concern among all of us. I mean, we all have either had children in the district or do have children in the district. So we want the best thing that ever could happen for all of our kids on some kind of equal playing field. So if we don't know this information, our responsibility is that we are to direct dollars to the places where it's most needed. So this truly helps us know when we start talking tentative budget, which is starting in January, that we're going to be able to start allocations of dollars in places they really need to be.
We see that going directly to that. I don't want to take up any time with that, but the CDIP that's coming to you in December, is that correct? That's really sorry. So we do that budget in January, but the CDIP has those plans, the turnaround type plans that we really need in place.
And to be honest, sometimes the CDIP is like, here's the CDIP, and then we go through it very quickly, and it's not always the most thorough way to do that, or we just don't do it as good as we could, I guess. And, you know, it is kind of stale, but it's what we're all about. I mean, CDIP is nothing but what are we doing for our kids? And that's how we have to do this. So I'm looking forward to it in December.
We've hopefully, with our partnership with the continuous improvement coaches on the CSIP and the CDIP, I hope that has become a more meaningful process for principals and their staff as well. I just remember as a principal not having that and I don't know, you know, being able to sit down with that person and look at the data and draft the goals and know that the goal is a 3 to 5 year goal and the objective is a 1 year goal, and then put the strategies in place instead of just not having that support to do it. So I hope that's been beneficial to our schools.
I would like to ask, if it's possible to almost treat this document almost like a CSIP, in that meaning that like, when we say success, I mean, it's supposedly it is a living document, right? And so, I would like to try to keep this document alive. And if maybe quarterly or something that we could get something, because then that holds us accountable as well. I mean, just this document, just to bring it back and say, you know, you saw these trends and or you saw that particular, you know, subgroup doing this or that, just to feed us some more information on, or we're doing this or we're doing that, or we need you guys to help do something to help us do this. And if that is a possibility,
We can do it.
I think that, I know I as a board member would appreciate this almost becoming like a document that we would see periodically so that we can not just see it this one time and we'll see it again after the test the next time. So I think that will help kind of keep us, you know, holding us, I mean, that's basically holding us accountable, you know, as a board as well, to say, hey, okay, here's the information, you know, what are you doing with it?
You said making it a trend analysis document that's always living and always moving.
Absolutely.
It's always dynamic, not
I don't
static.
want to, I know we're busy and I don't want to add a lot of work, but if we could do that, that would be really good.
There's a to-be announced work session in March on the agenda that doesn't have a topic, and it could be the focus of that one.
That would be good.
And at that point, we will have given our winter map, so we will have
Oh,
some other
awesome.
data. to
That would
bring.
be perfect.
That worked fine.
Just so that we see it more often than not. So I appreciate that, thank you.
I was just looking at it because it's still up. Can you tell me what happened between 2018 and 2019 on the non-academic data review? It looks like the numbers just doubled in behavioral referrals and in-school suspension. I'm just wondering if there was something new that happened. It's 72.
72.
The behavior between 17-18 and 18-19, or 18-19 and 19-20?
Yeah, 2017 to 2018 and then 2018 to 2019.
On just on the behavior referrals?
Yeah, so the behavior referrals and then the in-school suspension.
I'd have to delve into that by school, Esther.
I just saw those numbers, I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, I know, I'm trying to think back, that was when I was the principal at Bate. I feel like there was something about, we changed the way we were keeping records in IC, and we weren't always putting in school suspensions in. I think Tina remembers this, and so then we made the switch to always making sure those were documented in IC, especially because I remember this because special education students were held to 10 days of suspension for a student with an IEP, and those in-school suspensions count as part of those 10 days. So we really cleaned up how we were documenting. We also, I know when I took the job at Bate in 16, 17, we moved from doing a paper referral process to making sure everything was documented in IC. So that may have changed a little bit of that over those couple of years. And just making sure we're keeping all of our records in the same place. I think we kind of came to a point in 2018-19 where we finally started all going down the same path. We're doing that right now also with the EL and Gifted and Talented because we keep all of our other student service plans in IC, so we're going to start keeping all of those in IC as well instead of having a million different ways to do them. Consistency.
Sort of related question. So as we were going through each of these, this is a huge document, by the way. They don't just give you this, right? Like you put this
No,
together.
between the two of us, this is Donda Kuykendall. If you haven't met Donda, she is our district-wide data coordinator. She teaches me about data every day. Donda, sometimes I put stuff together. I started the color novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished charts. I did a couple, and she was like, all right, I'm going. And she went from there and made the rest of them. And then you'll see the enrollment summary data that I'm getting ready to present. She did all of that. I didn't put any of it together.
Some of those charts came from the CDAP.
Yeah. So some of it came from, some of it was stuff we did in-house to present to the principals when we were under embargo. Some of it came from what we had to do for CSIP needs assessment. So between the two of us, that whole document came together that we presented
Well,
to you.
this is a lot of work.
Pulled out the biggest pieces to put in there.
Thank you.
And there's other stuff that went just to the principals that goes even deeper into some other stuff too, so. There's a lot.
So, thank you all for doing that. I know that's just a huge amount of work, but it's so helpful for us to be able to
We
see it
enjoy
like
it.
this.
Yeah, we're a little nerdy that way.
I understand. The other thing that, as we look through these, part of my job and what I actually do for a living is looking at which students this instruction is working for and which students it is not. And I think that's fairly clear from our data. And I guess my question is, do we have a mechanism by which to ask students why it's not working, like from their perspective? Is that a thing that we have any way to collect?
I'm sure we could have a way.
I think that would just be interesting to see. And, you know, in some cases, they'll tell you. I don't know. So, just a thought.
There's another piece of accountability that I didn't include in here, and it's quality of school climate and safety survey that the students filled out prior to taking any of the assessments. And we have a recap of that too that I can bring back to you that Donda did.
Ask questions specifically about, did I learn during COVID? Were my teachers, did I meet with my teachers every day? Virtually, if I was virtual, it has specific questions. It actually divided up into 3 categories. Learning, safety, and culture maybe. And those areas are color-coded, and then we have it district-wide. So we can bring that if you would like to look at it. Then
Let's put it on for next meeting,
yeah.
next week.
Next week, sure.
Yes.
It's already complete.
Yeah, it's complete. It's easy to.
Okay.
Is it all quantitative, or are there any open-ended questions?
It's all quantitative, isn't it?
Yes.
There weren't any open.
Yeah, no, open-ended. I don't know if, yeah. If there were any comments, like at the bottom, those weren't shared with us.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think what you're saying, you can almost like an exit interview, so to speak, from the student's perspective. And it'd be good if we sat down after those come back and still ask them. It'll be a little old, it's a little dated, because we'll get those the 1st of October. I just wonder how our students would respond immediately after the assessment, how they thought they did, were they prepared, etc. And then come back when the results are in October and ask, why'd you do this well? Why did you, is that kind of what you're approaching?
Somewhat. I mean, I think when we ask our students, why are you not learning math? Or why is it, when we look at this data, why are African-American male students performing at this level and our white female students are performing at this level? Like, tell me what your thoughts are on that. And
Well, we don't have to wait for a second on that.
they'll tell. And you know, their perspective comes out in the way that a middle school and high school and elementary school perspective comes out, but we can read on our end when we hear enough of them. Okay, it looks like they're not developed, you know, they don't have a relationship with their teacher, they don't think their teacher cares about them, or whatever that happens to be.
Yep.
Or they're doing better in math because I feel like we can do whatever. So I just think it gives us a lot of good information.
So Jennifer, let me ask, how many kids would be needed to make it a fair assessment on these questions? I mean, you could just ask like 2 kids.
That's correct, and you can definitely not give this.
With our size, it would have to be all of them.
Yeah, that's
Right,
right.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that'll be great. Does anybody else have any
No, move on.
questions? Well, a little brevity. Okay, let's move on to the enrollment numbers and summary data.
Don will probably jump in a little more here because she actually put this together, all like, she's amazing. I think I have it in the same order you have it. Is this the first page you see? Okay. So this is just an overall summary. So you see actually 6 schools listed there because we do have an A5 school, Anchor Academy. And then we have Danville High, Bate Middle, Tolliver Intermediate, Hogsett Primary, and then we have Sunrise. And Sunrise, I'll go ahead and say this, Sunrise enrollment cannot fluctuate too much. They have 27 beds, period. So they always sit right around 27. But one thing that Donda added in last week, she had checked all this on September 23rd, and she added that column that has current 11.5 and 21.22, so that you could see that it actually increased a little bit from September 23rd to 11.5. So you can see that our enrollment from last year to this year is up 11 students on the 23rd, and then 11 more on the 5th. That's district-wide. Do you have any?
No, I don't have anything to add. The bottom one, it says change, it's changed from the previous total. So it's a plus or minus. So the big drop was the beginning of, was the COVID when we had a bunch of students that pulled out to go to homeschool or for whatever reason. But you can see the fluctuation is not drastic.
The drop from COVID to current looks like, so if I look at the spring of 2020 is whenever you would basically say kids went home. It looks like we're down about more or less 70 kids from then.
Yes.
So we're going back up.
Yeah.
So, but let me ask you guys, why would you think that number's important to the board?
But, you want me to?
Yes, please.
I just want to
Yes.
see why it is important. This is so important to the board. So, Dr. Thomas?
I've got two reasons. And number one, every time that, we want to use all resources to elevate our students. The more students we have, the more dollars associated with that student to use those dollars to elevate all students. And so a drop off, probably the 106 is not a fair number, but that's a substantial amount of resources that are lost that year. The second thing that I was going to say is there's this perception that we're losing numbers in Danville, and we are not. The trend data clearly shows that we are trending, we're where we are and trending up again. And the next document that Ms. Adler has and Dr. has is a very telling document, I think. So those are my thoughts, Mr. Becker.
Well, and you hit it there. I mean, I know for a lot of folks that finances don't matter.
They matter.
But when, you're getting 4,000 a student from the state, and then all of a sudden you're 70 fewer than you had before, well, that's almost $300,000. And you can only do so much budget cutting and all like that. But going through the report very thoroughly, we're trending up again, and that's a real positive. But these are numbers that we need to know as a board. Do you all agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Should we move on to the next page?
Sure.
So the next page is a very telling document, like Dr. Thomas said. At the top in the green section, you see enrollment, and these are our top transfer schools in and out. And then at the bottom, you see withdrawal, and you see 3 years of that data, and then you see a total at the end on the far right side. I'm going to focus just on the total for right now, just because the years add up to the total. You see that over the last 3 years in the 4 main schools, the high school, middle school, intermediate, and primary, we have enrolled 49 students from Boyle County over the last 3 years and only had 34 withdraw to Boyle County. So you see that our enrollment numbers from Boyle County are higher than our withdrawal numbers to Boyle County. And that's similar on a lot of these. Fayette, it's not like the ones where people would have to physically move. Those are probably moves we couldn't help because they were having a bona fide change of address. I put my glasses on. This is a little bit smaller than the first page. You also see that we've had a higher number over the past 3 years transferred to homeschool than we've had come back in from homeschool. So, but we're not anywhere on those anything to be concerned about. And these were one by one going through every student who had either come in and withdrawn, because it's a note on the enrollment. When we unenroll a student, we put a note on every single individual kid where they went when we get the records request. So Ms. Kuykendall went through every single one of those. It's really good information to have.
Look at the advertisements.
This is good. I know, this is.
It's public record.
It's
It's
open,
open.
get it publicly.
You can do it open. This was done through an open records request.
Oh, okay, so.
And then the next one are enrollment and withdrawal codes, so you can see,
You want to speak to that?
yeah, sure, go
Okay.
ahead.
So the enrollment code, there is no report in IC to pull this information. It doesn't exist as it looks. So we had to build what's called an ad hoc, and you go in and tell it what you want and pull it stuff. So these are the different enrollment codes and withdrawal codes that you put in when a kid comes and goes. Now, keep in mind, there's notes and there's highlighted parts. This is possibly counting students more than one time. You know, a kid comes to us, they start with us at the beginning of the school year, they leave, they go somewhere else, they come back. So there could be, so that's why the numbers are higher than what our total enrollments might be. So when you run this report, as Ms. Sackerly said, the notes section will say where a student came to us from or went to. Those notes aren't always complete, so I also put a note about that on there. You know, there's some that are blank. So it's as best of the information as we can get, but it is a situation where we built it. We went through kid by kid on the enrollments and the withdrawals to see where they went to come up with that information. And you'll see some codes only apply to certain grade levels. I mean, it's very detailed. So if there are any specific questions, we're happy to answer those if we
Do we have
can.
any data, do we have anything, even though the number is, not as exactly what I thought it would be, but, do we have any data with our data 25s to see, where they are going, or what was the reasoning? Do we do anything with, do we have any information with those?
That's kept at the school level mainly because
Yeah.
those conferences are required and they fill out that paperwork to drop out.
Yes.
We do everything within our power for them not to.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
It's a little, now that the
Well, now,
legal age is
because the
18,
age is
not
right, that's
16,
what,
it's a
because,
little.
right, exactly.
um,
So it's not as easy anymore.
Right.
Right, it's not as easy, and
By
the
statute.
information there is not quite as
Okay.
specific.
I just hate to lose one,
Right, exactly.
but I understand.
And some of those might be 5 years as well.
Yeah,
not
some of
just
those are
4
seniors
years.
that
Could be.
returned
That's
and
true.
then didn't finish.
Thank you very much.
I don't have any questions on that. And then we included the enrollment summary reports that we used, or I shouldn't say we, that Donda used.
I wanted you to see that the numbers didn't come from the sky. So I actually printed the enrollment at that particular day. You can actually go in any day of the year and print an enrollment tab for that specific day. So I wanted you to know where that information came from, and it wasn't arbitrary.
Thank you. Another good report.
It's important, I think it's, the one that stands out to me is the W-22, the transfer to another public school in Kentucky. I think it's important to note that we are almost at the close of the first semester, and our numbers are pretty low of kids who have transferred out to another Kentucky public school at this point. Granted, we're only halfway through the year, but if we're only at 1 when Donda pulled to us in October, and last year we had 18 total, we're not even halfway to where we were last year, and we're almost to the close of the first semester.
Absolutely.
And we're still enrolling students every day. Miss Kelly left, but I was here the other day, and she had 3 new enrollees, and I was here one day last week.
What was interesting for me when I was going through the data was how many students we have coming in and out from out of state. I didn't realize that number would be as high as it was. So I thought that was
I noticed that
interesting.
as well.
Okay, go ahead, Sherry.
That's the last report page. Last several pages are
Let's just
just
go with what it is.
the infinite campus reports that Donna used to craft these reports, like she said, just so you could see where the numbers came from.
Thank you again for that. That's
Any other questions or concerns or observations from any of the board? Okay, thank you all. The two reports are well done and great information for us. I really appreciate the work into that. Okay, so if there's not anything else, let's move on to board policy 081131. This is a first reading, and Dr. Thomas, if you'll just tell us what the, if I remember correctly, go ahead.
Yeah, on this one, so this one is the one that goes with, it's just a cleanup of a policy that really removes a little bit of language around the Commonwealth diploma that is now defunct. And so we're just cleaning this policy up, removing that. Did I say that? I mean, that wording.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so we don't vote on this. The next meeting, it'll be on the second reading, and then we'll approve the document. Okay? All right, so Mr. Gopher, I guess you'll talk to us about the Kdp Offer of Assistance.
Yeah. I'm gonna step out of my hiding place and corner there for a second. You've got the KDP Offer of Assistance. This is something that we ask the board to approve each year. Basically, the state gives us so much money for technology. We use it to buy Chromebooks, servers, infrastructure, wireless access points, just the different needs that we have technology-wise. And they give us so much money a month or a year, but in order for us to receive the money, the board has to match it. So the first offer is $15,574. Throughout the year, we'll get either one or two more offers for a total of about $35,000. This is in our budget. We carry it over every year. So really, it's already been budgeted, so I'm asking for your approval tonight to approve basically the total amount. I know it says first offer, but that way I don't have to come back to you each time that they give us a new offer. So it'd be about $35,000 for the year, and it's in the budget. So anybody want to make a motion? If you have any questions, I'll answer.
Does anybody have any questions? So we do need.
That's the same that we've done in the past.
Yeah, it's normal.
It's standard every district. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and approve the whole $35,000 amount for,
Around 35.
around $35,000 amount for the fund.
Second motion.
So we have a motion and a second for the acceptance of the assistance from KDP. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move down to, and I hope you all had a chance to look at this. We're going to basically try to get the board meeting calendar out a little earlier. Now, this is just the board meeting calendar.
Not the work session.
Not the work, well, I mean, all of it. One thing that you'll notice is that not every month we're going to have a work session. So Dr. Thomas and I talked about it. And there's just some months we don't need to have a work session, and we can just go on and have a regular meeting that month. So if you all would look at this, if you all want more time to peruse it, I mean, we're not desperate to approve it tonight.
We put on the agenda to approve next Monday meeting from.
We can.
I would agree with that.
I do that.
Okay.
Do that.
So basically, if I remember, we would have, what did you say?
So I think you'd have 18 total meetings, and then instead of doing the work sessions at the schools, which is a little more cumbersome, we would do the work sessions at the district office, at the boardroom, and then we would visit for our regular meetings in the school. And so each school would get a visit in the spring and a visit in the fall, and summer meetings would be all at the central office boardroom. And then also naming the work sessions, so you'll know what to anticipate for each one of those work sessions, whether it's tentative budget or the assessment like you had tonight. Then those would be the specific work of that session. You can still vote on other items like doing that first reading, but that would be the focus of the work during that time.
So it wouldn't be just totally about that.
It would
We'd still have a regular agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also you all know that during the superintendent search process, you will have special call meetings as well. That will be in addition to what you'll see here for 2022.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Okay, and one thing I do want to ask, are there any issues about what time we have our meetings? I just want to make sure that 6 is good for everyone,
I feel like the same.
okay? And these are still based on Mondays. Is Monday still good? Now, we do have a Wednesday in there, a couple of Wednesdays, but those are generally after holidays or
Mm-hmm.
breaks, or fall breaks or whatever. So Mondays are still good?
Yeah.
All right, well, if you all would, just look this over, and then we'll put it on next week's agenda for hopefully approval. And if you all have suggestions, please let me know or let Dr. Thomas know, and we'll see if we can get those fitted in, okay? All right. Next item on the agenda is a discussion on the superintendent search firm. I did send all of you all an email that I did send to Dr. Saylor, asking for more of a, recommend, or what the different things were, and that we really didn't go over. The breakdown of details.
That's okay.
Their base rate for the least expensive was $7,200. The base rate for KSBA is $6,000. I do feel like that, this is me personally, that I do have a lot of loyalty to KSBA because they are our organization, and they provide us with a lot of training and documentation and things that we use as a board almost every day. So, does anybody want to make a motion at this point?
I was just gonna say, I feel like our last meeting, we discussed that this was our preferred, was to use KASA for a variety of reasons. So I guess, is there anything changed between now and then, other than the money amount, which we already knew? Or is there, am I missing something? Is there something else?
That would be my, same conclusion. After everything, I would go with KASA.
I agree.
Okay, so do we need a motion in a second?
I'd like to offer a motion that we use KASA, the Kentucky Association of, Kentucky Association of School Administrators, as our search firm for our new superintendent search process.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion in a second. I'd like a roll call vote. So, Esther?
I'm conflicted, in the sense of, one is for the school board and one for the administrators. But if everyone else feels like this is one of the best instance, then I will vote for CASA. Are there any other concerns? Or is that?
Well, I mean, we can still be in discussion, but we're actually going to vote.
Okay, well, then I guess I'll vote for CASA.
Okay?
Wayne?
Okay, I'll vote KSBA. Okay, Wade?
KASA.
Okay.
Jennifer, KASA.
Okay, so the motion passes 4-1 that we will use KASA as our search firm, and we will get in touch with them right away, and then we'll start getting calendars set up and get the committees put together and so forth, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm just glad we've got the decision made. Good deal. All right, let's go down to number 9, which would be finalization of Dr. Thomas's contract. When we hired Dr. Thomas, we had said that the contract would be updated and amended, and so it wasn't, like we had presented in stone. So, Dr. Thomas, do you have some comments you want to make?
The contract is exactly the same as the one that we signed. I'm not getting any more money or anything like that. There were some things Vince thought should be cleaned up. So for example, I'm an adjunct professor at both Asbury and at EKU, and I'd be allowed to continue that. He thought that was important to be in there. And then the health insurance is required where I moved from retired to, and so putting that in there with that, basically I get I get the same benefits of all 240-day employees. And I think those are the only two changes, the adjunct and the health benefits, same benefits as 240-day employees.
So,
I'd like to offer a motion that we approve the superintendent's contract with the amendments made.
I'll second that.
and we have a motion and a second to approve the superintendent's contract as submitted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Excellent. Okay, thank you. All right, let's go to item 10, which would be the consent agenda items. Do you want to go through these, Dr. Thomas?
I can
Just
quickly go
briefly,
through
yeah.
them. You'll take action on these next week at a November 15th meeting. And most of these are ones that you're very familiar with. So whenever you get a memorandum of agreement from EKU, Bluegrass Community, University of Kentucky Student Teaching, those are all just our agreements on placing of students and the services that they get. Then we've got a request for a leave of absence and a facilities usage request. You've seen plenty of those. The only one that I will probably just separate from that group to give you information on, because you've seen them all, is the, and I could get the name wrong, Tina, Dr. Rodaker. Do you mind to jump in and say what this MOA would be?
That's the only question I had.
Sure, absolutely. You all are aware of the work that our school wellness counselor has done, and we've been able to have some grants to also contract with Withdrawal Counseling Services, and they've been able to provide a lot of wraparound services for our students and families. I mean, it's been amazing to see what they've done in the homes as well. And we are finding, and some of it is COVID related, that we do need a higher level of care. A lot of our students, unfortunately, we have some who have to attend residential facilities. A lot of times they're given a diagnosis, prescribed medication that makes a world of difference for those students, but it's usually a psychiatrist who manages those medications. It's very difficult for our families to get into that kind of specialist in Lexington, and transportation to Lexington is a barrier for some of our families. So with some of the extra ESSER money that we've been able to receive, that's a request that we thought we would put in. It was approved by the state. Dr. Rodaker is a child psychiatrist. He's got a lot of experience. He's been in that area, actually had an office here for a while, moved to Lexington, and wanted to come back home. So the opportunity presented itself that we met with him and talked about maybe what he could do for our students and our families. And it's, I mean, I had goosebumps meeting with him and thinking about it, but he's going to be able to actually come into our schools, observe firsthand, conduct some formal assessments, help with some diagnosis, help with medication management. I cannot tell you what a gift this is for us to be able to provide these services to our families. And the other thing this is going to allow us to do is, a lot of times in special education, for certain eligibility categories, we have to have a medical diagnosis. And we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait, you know, wasting some precious time. So this is really going to allow us to access some medical information and services that we've never, ever been able to access before. So we proposed 5 hours a month. That's where we're starting. The grant gave us enough funds to allow us to continue this for 2 years, is what's in the grant. He did give us quite a bit of a break on his hourly rate, which we appreciate, but to actually have the ability for a child psychiatrist to come into our building and work with our staff, and that's building so much capacity with our staff as well. So we're hoping to learn a lot from him, and also to give him a different perspective of what some of these issues look like in the school setting. Because it's easy to sit in a doctor's office and talk about the child having some difficulties, but to actually be in a school setting and see what that looks like, he's very anxious and excited to come in and work with us. So this is an opportunity that I'm very happy to bring in front of you. Do you have any questions about any?
Just thank you for your vision, and you know, making this happen because, for a district such as ours, I mean, to be able to have that, I mean, I think that's good stuff. So
That's like a hands-on assessment.
Appreciate
It
that.
everywhere.
Absolutely.
That
Thank you
makes
so
a
much.
difference, hands-on. Actually seeing the environment and the student in his normal environment, that makes a difference rather than his office.
Because typically a doctor sees a child in their office,
Yeah.
you know, in just that setting, and they don't see, you know,
What affects them
True
in
impact.
other settings.
yes.
Yeah, understand.
Well, and I think this is hitting at a perfect time when we're on our way back from COVID. We know we've already seen such a huge rise in mental health concerns from our students, so I'm really glad that this is coming along right about now.
It's providing family support too.
It's great.
Mhm. Okay, so we will approve these on next week's agenda,
Okay.
okay?
One more though, what's, the facility usage?
So that's our that's the strings program, the Heritage Area Strings Program. They use Gravely Hall every year.
So it's great, okay, I just couldn't, I was looking
Yes.
and, looks like everything's.
Everything is, and on that one, if there is a need for, and I'm just kind of.
That's okay, I rescind my question, I rescind my question.
I don't believe it.
It's good, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, Wayne, you want anything else? you want
No,
to-
I'm good. I didn't see the page. I mean, I see it now, yes. Yes.
All right.
Explanation needed.
So we will, like I said, we'll have that on
Okay.
next week's agenda for approval. Sometimes, as you all know, things may come up, so we'll make sure that you all are aware of that. All right, item 11, which is other, Dr. Thomas?
Oh, I just want to reintroduce Olivia Moore. Olivia's here with us this evening, and we're so excited that she's our senior media manager. Welcome. And hopefully you've already seen some communication that's been going out this week, and I do appreciate the Advocate Messenger. They let her out a week early so she could start with us because the work was immediate, and we really appreciate that. And she's already made several contacts in our district. She's visited our schools. She's really been involved with some controversial things, somewhat controversial things in our schools, like how we're going to get these posters back up for our forensics team and so forth. So she's got some really good ideas on that, and is working positively with our administrators. And starting the newsletter back up. It will be coming out. I don't know, did you set a date on that, Olivia? Is it Wednesdays?
I'm aiming for Wednesday, yes, for
Yeah.
next week.
And she's also on
Gonna
that,
make it happen.
in that newsletter, going to have a feature article for something positive going on in one of our schools that week. So should be able to at least see something from each one of our schools in that newsletter. Some great ideas on QR codes with our realtors and doctor's offices and so forth. And the only downside is, it's an upside. She's going to go to the Kentucky PR conference next Monday and Tuesday, where she's going to learn a lot of things going on in education with PR. She's going to meet the Bowling Green, the one that Brad Hughes said would be the great mentor. So she will meet her at this conference. But the bad thing is she'll miss our board meeting next Monday evening. So, but we're so happy to have Olivia, and she's already hit the ground running and making a huge impact.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Anybody else under other have any suggestions or things you'd like to?
No, I would just like to say, on record officially that, I am just really, really pleased with, the Denver Independent School District staff, personnel, from the schools all the way up to the central office, with the ability to adapt. We got an interim superintendent, and as far as I can tell you, I mean, it's just me, but I thought that it has been seamless. So appreciate your work and coming in and being willing to help us move forward and guide us through the process. Like Ms. Adams had already said, we've had so much turnover and just kind of ups and downs and in the middle and ins and outs, but to be able to come in and settle, the district, it's noticeable. And so just wanted to say, I give basically it's a long shout out to all of you guys. So thank you very much for what you guys did. We appreciate you.
Definitely. Hopefully, next week, Dr. Thomas can report. We're kind of a bit in cahoots on trying to get the anchor situation anchored. That's awful. But we have an anchor sitting over that needs to be sandblasted and painted. Yeah, and so there is.
Belong to us?
It belongs to us.
It does? I thought it was still belonging.
Yeah, the Alumni Association paid $1,600 to get it shipped up here. And we have a long ways to go, but I think it's an important step for our district. I think it's going to be a coming together event, and so we're going to look for ideas. I think the first idea was to put it in front of the high school. You don't have a walkway runs down the middle of and take the walkway.
So it can be seen more.
Yes,
on that side street over
and
there.
make like a circle.
Oh, sure.
And then put the anchor in the middle with some benches and possibly electric.
Oh, that sounds really good.
So the reason I'm bringing this up, board, is that we probably will have some unexpected expenses involved.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping we can get this figured out. And of course, we always want to do it as least expensive as possible.
So with that being said, so we have a meeting here. Are you expecting it to go beyond Superintendent Thomas's threshold for approval?
I don't think it will.
Okay, let's get it done.
It may include some bids you want to the state that you all will have to approve.
Absolutely.
We saw some aluminum cans.
And then also, what's really rare about this anchor, I don't know why I know all this, but I do, is that a chain has come with it, and that is very unusual, because a lot of times the chains just get lost. So the anchor we're looking at, it's huge. I mean, it's 18,000 pounds or something like that. So we're looking at that to be painted anchor in Danville blue. But then the chain, each link will be purple, blue, white, gold, so that we can encompass all of everybody.
Fake color.
So, and then hopefully we can make that a student project, so that, we just need a really good quality oil-based paint.
Makes sense.
So the painting part's
those are all
easy.
feeder schools to the.
It's just that we have to get it sandblasted.
It should
and get it
be,
here.
absolutely.
So anyways, hopefully we'll have more of a report next week. Okay?
And is there, since we're still in early, is there a report on, you mentioned BG, and of course, what are we in the process with our softball and baseball?
Restrooms?
Well, just.
The concessions and restrooms.
If it's okay, we'll have a report next week because I am unaware of the progress there. So I will be happy to make a report next Monday evening.
Okay, that good for everybody?
Yes.
Are you aware?
Unaware is not a bad thing, Mr. Campbell.
No. I'm just-
Unaware.
Next week is good for me.
Okay. All right. Okay, so if there's not anything else under other, we need a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to offer a motion at this time for adjournment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Then we all will be gladly to vote to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.